I'm with Asha Jadeja, a prominent Indian-American venture capitalist based in San Francisco in the US. She's the founder of the Motwani Institute for Thought Leadership in Innovation, a student of international affairs and geopolitics. And here in Delhi, Ambassador Ashok Kantha, India's former ambassador to China, India's former director of the Institute of Chinese Studies, which is India's foremost think tank watching China. Ambassador Kantha has also been a former High Commissioner to Sri Lanka as well as Malaysia. And today I'm connecting the time zones. As you can see, I'm joining New Delhi with San Francisco. And this is a brand new series by ThePrint on India and the world, India's view of the world. And today we are launching this series with an episode on China, with a discussion on China. So welcome, Ms. Jadeja in San Francisco and Ambassador Kantha right here in New Delhi.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
Can I start with you, Ambassador Kantha? We are in an interesting time in the India-China relationship. The G20 is upon us. China's President Xi Jinping is not coming to the G20. So let me start by asking you, sitting here in New Delhi, India being the host of the G20, why is Xi Jinping not showing up? He's sending his Premier Li Qiang instead. Do you think that India should care?
I will not comment on whether India should care, but he's not coming to New Delhi to attend the G20 summit. In my assessment, represents a clear signal both to India and to G20 as grouping. As you know, Xi Jinping has attended all previous summit meetings of G20 since 2013. The meeting in Rome, he did virtually because of COVID situation. So he's making a departure from past practice. He was also in Johannesburg just a few days ago to attend the BRICS summit. He's not coming to India is clearly a thought out decision. It reflects the present predicament, present downturn in India-China relations and a lack of optimism that there will be upward movement anytime soon. Likewise, he's also sending a message to G20 as a grouping. Clearly, China is not as comfortable in G20 today as it is in platforms like BRICS and SCO, where China is the leading country. Okay. So we have to see how it works out.
Okay. Ms. Jadeja, you're in the US, you're in the heart of the capitalist world, shall we say, and you're also a student of geopolitics and international affairs. Now tell me, Joe Biden, the US president, has already commented on Xi Jinping's absence at the G20, and he said, oh, he wish he could have met Xi Jinping at the G20. So what does this mean? Does this mean that the US-China, or the so-called US-China rivalry that we hear of all the time, do you think this is for real? What do you make of what Joe Biden said?
I think, Jyoti, I think not only is the rivalry real, it's intensifying as we speak. And, you know, I'm beginning to see sort of two polar, you know, groupings, multinational groupings, multilateral groupings emerging between BRICS and G20. I don't see this as a competition shaping up between US and China, but it's actually between a grouping that will be like a G20 led by India and US, and then BRICS, which is led by China. China is working on it very actively in a very proactive sort of a manner. It's a well thought out decision. A lot of people are speculating that it might be because we had a virtual summit for SCO, or that you know, the Chinese simply did not want to deal with Biden because they have so many tariffs and so many, you know, new regulations against import and export, especially export from the US of certain critical technologies, which which China has been trying to vote down. So I think it's a bunch of factors there, and this China is obviously seeing it as a part of its larger geopolitical strategy to be, you know, the leader of the global South, not be having India taking that hegemonic role in the global South.
Right.
and wanting to actually steer the conversation in its own way. I think it was, in my view, this was not a very wise decision on on China's part, because they just met in South Africa,
Right.
and it would have been given that US has been sending so many secretaries from here, Secretary of Commerce Anthony Blinken went, the Defense Secretary went, and
Right.
the Commerce Secretary Raimondo is still there.
Yes.
So while this is going on, to me it is surprising that he's not taking this opportunity to meet with Biden face to face in a neutral place like India. So it's actually a disappointment for all of us who are watching China.
Okay, so let's, Ambassador Kantha, I'd like to draw you into a little bit of detail and discussion on the India-China economic relationship. I mean, of course, the G20 is...
Can I just offer a comment on what Asha said there?
Okay, sure.
I entirely agree with Asha that geopolitical contestation between USA and China is not only a reality, but it's escalating. And this is going to be a defining characteristic of emerging global setup. But I'm not so confident about BRICS becoming a rival grouping, eclipsing the G20. Yes, recently at the Johannesburg summit, BRICS was expanded. China is trying to dominate BRICS. China would like to give a more geopolitical complexion to BRICS as distinct from its earlier preoccupation with the economic issues. But I'm not sure that will really work out, because a larger grouping need not become a more effective grouping. In fact, it might become more incoherent grouping. Besides, India has also a large number of other member countries of BRICS. They're not prepared to let the grouping acquire an anti-Western, agenda for various reasons. So how BRICS will pan out remains to be seen.
Okay, that's an interesting observation. Can I bring you both into a discussion perhaps of the India-China economic relationship? And I've just been reading this this report by the brokerage firm Bernstein, which has been reported widely, which says that India is a median 16.5 years behind China on broad business and economic parameters. And then it goes on to define some of these parameters, for example, patents, FDI, forex reserves, as well as exports. And let me just give you some statistics according to the Bernstein report. When it comes to patents, it says India is behind China by 21 years. In terms of FDI, India is 20 years behind China, 19 years in forex reserves, and 17 years in exports. So basically what they're saying is that India today is at a place where China was in 2007, or about there, 2007 to 2000, between say 2005 and 7. Now, Ambassador Kantha, you've lived in China as an ambassador, as India's former ambassador. What do you make of what Bernstein is saying? And what does this mean for India? What should India do?
No, Jyoti, there is no doubt about the fact that China is well ahead of India, in terms of its comprehensive national strength, in terms of its economic capabilities. That's reflected the fact that the GDP of China is 5 times as large as GDP of India. Whether they're 16.5 years ahead of us, I think I'm unable to comment on that. What I would like to point out that looking ahead, technology is going to be a major driver of growth. And India is relatively well placed to take advantage of current drivers of growth. Moreover, China is slowing down. Today, there is an emerging consensus among economists that the Chinese economy is facing structural problems, and that current slowdown is not cyclical in nature. In fact, there is talk of peaking China, though that might be premature. If you look at a lower growth trajectory for China and a higher growth trajectory for India, over a period of time, we can reduce the gap with China. That's not going to be easy, but that's certainly in the realm of possibility. More so given the fact that China is facing not only economic headwinds, but very severe geopolitical headwinds. Look at its relations with the US-led West, which remains the main market for China. Those relations have become really fraught today. USA, European countries, Japan, they're all pursuing some variant of policy of de-risking vis-a-vis China. That's not going to help China's economic expansion and growth.
Okay. Ms. Jadeja, the same question to you. As a prominent Indian American venture capitalist in the US, how do you look at, you work closely with India, but how do you look at this huge divergence, this gap between India and China?
So there are two things. I first agree with the ambassador about the economic wise, and from the report also I agree that we are behind, of course.
Yes.
But I think in terms of influence, we are not only not behind, we might be a shade ahead now in terms of our influence with the Western world.
You actually say that?
Yes, I truly believe that right now the way things are between Washington DC and New Delhi, we have greater influence in Washington, D.C. and Europe, and even other parts of the world compared to China. China has a lot of economic clout. Yes, it does have Belt and Road Initiative. It has the CPEC in Pakistan and so on. But right now, there is a lot of nervousness that the market is facing as far as China goes. Those of us who are in venture capital, we are pulling out of China aggressively.
Why are you doing that?
Because, well, first of all, there's a real slowdown. There's an objective slowdown that's going on over there, but also because there's a lack of uncertainty. There's a lack of certainty. There's no predictability right now about how the CCP is going to behave vis-a-vis foreign investments, vis-a-vis our own portfolio companies. I mean, if it can make a Jack Ma of Alibaba disappear for a few months, and if it can make its own foreign minister disappear for a few months, if it can suddenly one fine day just call in a zero COVID policy, and then few months later, one fine day simply call it off, I think not only have the Chinese people lost the confidence in where their government is taking it, but all of us who are investor types who are looking at China as a big market, especially as AI and crypto takes off, we are all getting nervous. We don't want to be in China. But I want to really sort of go back and stress this point that the influence that New Delhi has in the United States and in Europe is something that I've never seen before. And this is not only just practically because we have been, we are doing well, it's a rising power. We get all the metrics from Eric Garcetti and everybody's, you ask Eric Garcetti to explain to you what is India in 2 words, and he will say ascendant power. It's not just that. What is happening right now is that the West and the US and Europe they know that India is a stable democracy. It's a democracy. It will always be in a stable place where it is right now. It will behave predictably, and as a result, what they are doing is they are investing in us in ways that I have never seen before. And fortuitously for us, what's also happened is that there is tensions growing in Taiwan. Now, because of what we are seeing, the disaster that Russia is facing in Ukraine, China is not going to, I don't think it's going to be attacking Taiwan in any short order, as a lot of people are predicting. I don't think so. By 2027 or something, right. I don't think so. But there is nervousness around it. And so the level of influence that we have, and I think with the kind of team that Modi has around him, like Jaishankar and all, I know that we are going to make the most of this situation. We have a killer team, Jyoti. We have a killer team in India.
I'm happy to hear that you believe that India has a killer team, but let me just press you both on this. Ambassador Kantha, isn't it interesting that Ms. Jadeja is talking about the comparative influence between India and China in the US? Now, that's an interesting observation, isn't it? That she feels that although India's economy is so much smaller, but comparatively, India has much greater influence than China in the West. Would you agree with that?
Jyoti, there is a great deal of anxiety in the USA and among Western countries in general about directions China is taking.
Mhm.
And there is a bipartisan support.
But why? Let me press you on that. Why? Why is there this deep anxiety on the part of the US about China? I mean, this is a communist nation. Predictability and stability are bywords of communist parties, especially when they are deeply invested in the economic relationship with the West. I mean, we saw during COVID, for example, that trade with the US and with the European Union with China only went up. Ambassador Kantha?
Well, a number of reasons. One fundamental contradiction is that US would like to maintain its preeminence in Indo-Pacific and globally, and it believes that China is challenging it. And this is reflected very categorically in various official documents coming out of Washington, D.C., including national security strategy, national defense strategy. So there is, this clash of ambitions between the established preeminent power and the wannabe aspirant preeminent power. That's one. Secondly, China's behavior on a whole lot of issues engenders a great deal of concern. Look at what they're doing in South China Sea, what they're doing in Taiwan Strait, what they're doing along India-China borders, what they're doing in East China Sea. They are, pursuing their unilaterally defined so-called core interests, completely disregarding sentiments of other countries. Thirdly, economic policies China is pursuing now, is giving primacy to state sector. It is becoming more and more unpredictable, as Asha pointed out earlier. In fact, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, during her visit to China, said that China is becoming uninvestable, and this is really a strong term to use.
Yeah, that's a very strong word. Yeah.
Strong, so there are concerns about investment climate in China. Fact that even ordinary activities like due diligence is being criminalized. Employees of Mintz and Bain and Company, they are being investigated against. Plus, attractiveness of China is waning as Chinese economy slows down. And slowdown is not going away. This is going to continue. I think this is going to be a persistent feature. Whereas India is looked at a more benign power, less ambitious, less aggressive, more in tune with strategic agenda and aspirations of other countries, both Western developed countries as also the global South. So rise of India is not creating anxieties the way aggressive behavior of China is doing. So that's the basic difference.
Okay. So, but Ms. Jadeja, let me just press you on this. Now, let's talk about global supply chains, right? I mean, China is at the heart of these global supply chains, and we've seen how over the last 40 years since Deng Xiaoping opened up the country, and a lot of China's wealth, in very simple terms, I mean, that's how people like us understand it, that in simple terms, China invited investment, Western investment, used that to sort of shore up its own economy, educate its people, improve health services. And as a function of that, you were able to become, able to graduate from the developing world into a developed nation. On the supply chain issue, if China still remains at the heart of 95% of the global supply chains, what does India do? India is attracting investment. Yes, you have an odd Foxconn factory, in Karnataka. Apple is trying to make in India. But how does India ramp up, geometrically, this sort of attractiveness as an attractive destination for Western investment?
Well, India is going to have to compete aggressively with other countries in the region like Vietnam and Malaysia and Bangladesh and all for manufacturing base, which we understand that we don't have a strong manufacturing base right now in India. That is true. But that said, I'm also seeing an aggressive, proactive steps being taken by various states in attracting and quickly assimilating some of these manufacturing technologies to be part of the supply chain. I think it's going to take us some time to get there. But I also think that India recognizes that while we are still going to be lagging behind on supply chains, we have an opportunity, Jyoti, to leapfrog on AI and quantum computing. These are massive industries that are shaking up Silicon Valley right now. We are seeing this revolution as big as the revolution that happened with the internet in 2000. So we are very likely to be, India is likely to be going up in that supply, in the food chain, and getting the size of its pie going up through an aggressive set of reforms which will attract, and we already have indigenous talent that can be doing very very aggressive AI innovation.
Are India and the US talking about these issues? Like you talked about riding this new wave of AI, of artificial intelligence. Are the two government, are the two sort of private business, are you talking about these issues?
When I say this, my friends chide me for this, but we Desis are running America, Jyoti. in many ways. And by that, I mean, I don't just read technology and all that, but we are at the core of what's happening in medicine. We are just a critical part of Wall Street. We are critical part of Washington DC. So there's a groundswell of understanding even amongst the India and the Indophiles who are running America right now, to say, how do we partner with India? It's stable. If we cannot trust this other giant that we've been working with, where else do we go where we can get this level of scale? It's India. And guess what? That's our home country. So you see there's a huge amount of back and forth that's going on in track 1, track 2, track 3 diplomacy that I have never seen before. I mean, we've never had in the past, 4 or 5 US companies, Silicon Valley companies, working so closely with Washington DC and saying, get us into UP, get us into Haryana, get us into Telangana. Yes, this level of proactive lobbying from Silicon Valley to say, we need to be here, and they're signing deals by the day. So I actually think we are going to be rising up the stack. We may not be at the bottom of the plumbing, I think, so to speak.
No, but can I just ask you this? You say that India is your home country, that bases are running America. But at the end of the day, you're Indian American, but you are American. You're not Indian, So
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
But there's a comfort, Jyoti, there's a comfort level that I'm referring to. There is a known entity. You see, India is a known entity. Today, you ship me if I go to China, and if I'm looking at startups there, and I just don't know how to navigate the system there. I do know that if I invested in a company, let's say in a robotics company or an EV company that I've invested in, if there was any problem, I know where to pick up the phone and call. I know what to do. So what I'm saying is that level of comfort which is there, the trust in knowing that this is how I can, and mind you, there are rascals in India also. I have run into startups that have been problematic, but so what? I still know what to do if I was running into serious difficulty. So there is a level of knowing this system, knowing India, and there is, देखो हमारा दिल वहां पे है ना, इंडिया में, आपके पास.
But Ambassador Kantha, this is such an interesting story, this Indian-American story. I mean, a lot of my family lives in the US, and I keep wondering how they are able to sort of, have their hearts in both places. But explain to me, Ambassador Kantha, you know China so well. Now, the Chinese American or the Chinese Canadian or the Chinese expatriate, when they put money back into China, was that a significant percentage of Western investment that came into China? I mean, what did the Chinese American, what did the Firangi Chinese do to help grow the China story?
If you look at the numbers, investments from outside, especially during early years of China's opening up, came predominantly from overseas Chinese, routed through Hong Kong and Taiwan, and to lesser extent Southeast Asia. It wasn't so much coming from Western companies, but China is trying to reach out to its overseas community in the USA and European countries are more for getting talent, technology. There is a degree of pushback also because, as you know, USA has become more protective about any transfer of technology to China, especially in sensitive areas. Jake Sullivan's famous Brookings speech on small yard, tall fence, where they would like to deny technologies to China in critical areas like artificial intelligence, semiconductors, quantum computing, notwithstanding end use. So this is being done across the board. You have in Department of Commerce Regulation 7th October 2022. Most recently, draft regulations of 9th August this year on outward investment, which mainly targets China. So a different ecosystem is emerging where it will become more difficult for China to access its overseas Chinese community for sourcing of technology, something it had done on a very large scale earlier, rather successfully. It had this 1,000 talent program under which it got overseas Chinese researchers to come and work in China. But now that's no longer working so smoothly because of pushback from USA and other countries. Indian story is different. As I mentioned earlier, there's much greater degree of comfort with India in USA. And I don't find any difficulty in understanding why people like Asha can remain very good American citizens and at the same time contribute to growth of India. I think having multiple identities comes very naturally to people like us in India. So I think this process will pan out differently compared to China's experience with overseas Chinese community.
Okay, so Ms. Jadeja, is there, if you're both talking about China being this big rival of the Americans, so do you feel that the US is much more comfortable with, for example, the export of sensitive technologies? The US in the past has not really exported sensitive technologies, but this time when Prime Minister Modi went to the US on his visit earlier in the summer, there is talk, there was signature on an agreement on the GE engine deal, for example, and that is likely to be underlined, and there's much more on the cards when President Biden visits Delhi. On the margins, there's going to be a bilateral visit with Prime Minister Modi. So this shift that you're talking about, this shift in the willingness, for example, of the US government to export sensitive technology to come closer to India. How do you explain this?
Within the inner circles of Washington, D.C. and the powers that be in the US has made a decision that it's going to beef up India. It is in America's interest to beef up India right now in every way, from security, from security and armament strengthening to economic growth, to political stability, and to diasporic connections. So the US actually sees it in its self-interest to see a strong India. If it ever were to go into any serious conflict with China, which it is actually, I truly believe that US is in a Cold War right now with China. It's already under our noses right now. So it sees as a counterbalance, as a major counterbalance to China. It sees India. It's investing in us at rates that we have never seen before, and the rates that we'll expect to see actually even going forward, we'll see a lot more, because they are seeing it as their defense spending in India. So it's only up to us. It's actually up to the Indian side now to be able to make the most of it. And I think India right now our Indian government is full of sharks, actually. they will grab opportunity the minute they see it. And I see this, this relationship being not just synergistic, but being, probably being a very, very, very powerful pole that's evolving right now.
So a follow-up question, Ms. Jadeja, you talked about how, American businessmen are looking at the states. You're talking about Gujarat and Haryana and Uttar Pradesh and looking at these sort of convergences between their companies and sort of working here in these states. Is there concern about human rights? And we know that a democratic presidency is usually very concerned about these issues. But what is surprising, and that's what I'd like to ask you as well as Ambassador Kantha, is that this democratic presidency is actually swallowing its spit on the human rights issue. And why do you think that's happening?
Well, this question has come up, right, multiple times. I think what happens is there are two narratives that are floating around. One narrative is coming from the Indian side. It's coming from from more sort of progressive democratic groups within India that feel that we have a problem. But there's also what's happening is there are two things. One, of course, is the rising China means US is going to be putting its blinders on for India and saying this is what we are just focusing on, the economy and security. We are, as long as it's not flagrant violations of human rights, we don't care. Second thing that's happening is that there is also this general, sort of a debate going on in the US where we are saying that, look, simply because somebody saw a lynching or somebody saw women being paraded somewhere in Manipur or something, if you look at data of what's happening in America, what's happening in UK, what's happening in Germany, then data-wise, per population of 1 million, we're still lower. So, for example, one of the numbers that was floating around was, especially when the Freedom House rating came up for India being 160 or something. At that point, one of the conversations going on was that, we have completely clamped down on media and this and that. And the discussion that happened at that point was that why are we not looking at the number of incidents where journalists have been hurt or killed or something, or there's violence against journalists per million, instead of saying that, this happened in UP or this happened in. So now the whole conversation has kind of shifted to this idea of what's going on in how many violent events are happening per million. What's happening is it's 3.2 in India. It's 3.2 in India versus 7 in the US. So we are safer. We are safer than America as far as media goes. For journalists, okay, just for journalists. So there is that kind of data coming out. There's data coming from Pew Research. There are surveys that are coming out from Carnegie Institute, which debunk some of these theories that are coming from more, I would say, from more progressive groups. So and also remember, it's in the interest of Washington DC to put on blinkers and say, look, we got a fantastic report from Eric Garcetti. Our ambassador is already there. He's been eating in multiple villages in India now. He knows what is going on. His report is A+.
I see. So Eric Garcetti, of course, the gentleman you're referring to is the US ambassador to India today. Ambassador Kantha, can I ask you the same question? We talk about this a lot in the Indian press, and including me, and we talk about how it's a bit like the elephant, isn't it? That you touch different parts of the elephant and then you form a different perspective or a different understanding of what this elephant is, the elephant in the room. But how do you see, as an Indian diplomat, as somebody who served in various capitals across the world, how do you see this? The fact that India's government, Prime Minister Modi, he's unabashedly nationalistic. He's unabashedly wants to put India on the world map. Do you think that there is already a transformation in the international media about this?
No, Jyoti, there's no doubt about the fact that a whole lot of countries find India to be a very attractive partner. That's particularly the case in the USA. They would like to look at the big strategic picture, where for a variety of reasons, the fact that India is the fastest growing large economy, technological base of India, so many Fortune 500 companies have the R&D facility in India. Indian diaspora in USA, which is very vibrant, and a whole lot of other factors are there. Besides, shared concerns about China is a strategic glue which brings the two countries together. But I would like to look at India-US relations as a very broad-based relationship rather than defined through narrow prism of China. Now, against this background, I believe the US administration in particular is pragmatic. They may have some concerns about the so-called democratic backsliding in India, but they realize that it's not a good strategy to articulate those concerns publicly. If they discuss those issues, that's done behind the doors, privately, quietly. And beyond a point, India cannot be pushed. I was in Washington, D.C. at a time when we had much less leverage on the Capitol Hill with administration. But even at that time, India was no pushover. So I think that background has to be borne in mind. And I'm sure our friends in the USA and Western countries always keep that in mind.
Ms. Jadeja, you have the last word. Ambassador Kantha's comment that India is no pushover. How do you respond to that? And how does the American, not just the Indian American community, but how did the Americans respond to that?
No, India is absolutely no pushover. It's in fact, it's exercising its economic and geopolitical muscle like never before. But it is remember, it's also unlike China or other sort of powers like ex-powers like Russia. India is a loved country. It's much loved and respected. In the West, it is seen as the place of great spiritual strength, great cultural diversity, which is true. It is thousands of languages, cuisines, people of different kinds. India is seen as a dreamland that people come to India looking for God, Jyoti. And I will stop at that, but that's truly the case. And I have to tell you guys, I just want to actually tell you a little, funny episode. But in California, in every city, in every corner, I'm now seeing Hanuman Chalisa being sung. And I'm talking about by white people. So it's not just Indian diaspora that is singing it, because there's a bhakti movement here. There's a huge bhakti movement here. So there is a love and affection for India that is you have to see it to believe it, Yeah.
Well, I'm going to.
I could just add a couple of sentences. If India allows its credentials as a vibrant democracy, as a pluralistic society to be weakened, it's not only a negative development for us in India, but it also to some extent undermines our attractiveness as a partner. I think we should not lose sight of that fact.
Right. I'm afraid I'll have to leave it here, but I think this very rich and very fascinating discussion between the two of you, Ambassador Kantha and Ms. Asha Jadeja in the US, definitely has enriched my understanding of what's happening, not just on the relationship between India and China, India and the US, as well as the triangle that we talk about, but just, I think, the fact that that India certainly is a unique civilization, an ancient one, and that perhaps we should all work together, India and the US, to look at how we can develop each of our strengths. But thank you both so much, Ms. Asha Jadeja in the US and Ambassador Ashok Kantha here in Delhi. Thank you for speaking to me at ThePrint.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. Nice to be here with you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador.